Okay, everyone. We're continuing where we left off last week. It's a great honor and privilege to be giving everyone this class again. Nice to have you all those that are with us on Zoom or with us on Facebook. Welcome, welcome. Baruchim haboyim b'shem Hashem. Before we start, we want to make a little prayer for all the Jews in Israel and for all the hostages. May Hashem bring them back swiftly. And all the soldiers that are fighting for our people, and all those that are injured, may God heal them, and all those that are suffering from all the anti-Semitism around the world. Hashem should help them as well. We have a lot of things going on in the world. It's a busy world. But in the middle of everything, we find time, Baruch Hashem, to have a class. And so I'm going to start. If you just take out your Siddur. We spoke about some of the difficulties that the Jewish people have had over the years. And some of the prayers are reflections of that. So if we look on page 15. So if you look on page 15, you'll see we're talking about the beginning of the small Shema. We call it the small Shema. As you recall, we spoke about how there was a time in Persia where the Jews were not allowed to say the Shema because the Shema reiterates the Jewish story of oneness, of monotheism. And there were religions in those days that believed in 2 gods, 3 gods, many gods, polytheism, duality. And so the rabbis came up with the idea. They stopped the Jews from saying Shema. So they came up with the idea that Shema should be said before you go to shul. So this way it won't be a dangerous thing. So they created the Shema, a mini Shema before the Shema. So you'll see on page 16, you'll see in the big letters, that's the prayer of the Shema. But there is a little introduction to it, and it says, a man should be forever God-fearing in the innermost recesses of his heart. So that's on page 15. A person should be God-fearing privately. And that's the key over here. La'olam yehei adam yirei shamayim b'seisa. Privately, secretly, we should be God-fearing. And that was, like I said, because this prayer was in response to the anti-Semites who wanted to try the Jewish people to stop saying the Shema. We said, no, we're not going to stop. We will continue to be it, maybe not publicly, but privately. And this happened many times in Jewish history, when Jews had to be Jews in the private, because they couldn't be in the public. And unfortunately, in some places, in some countries now, it's becoming very, very difficult to be a Jew in public, because of all the anti-Semitism. And unfortunately, there are some people that are hiding their mezuzahs and hiding their stars of David, etc., etc. But that we can't give in. At this point, we can't give in. We have to be very, very proud, even prouder Jews, and be even in public Jewish. But in times when they were only allowed to be in private, they said, Lo'olam yehi adam yirei shamayim b'seisa. Note, we say, forever you should be Adam. A mensch, right? I know some people whose name are Adam, Adam. A lot of Jewish people are named Adam after the first person, the first Jew, first human being. So the first thing is we say, La'olam yehi Adam. Forever, a man should always be Adam. Adam is a mensch. We need to be a mensch. We need to be real. We need to be a real human being. But he says, you have to be a mensch, you have to be a good Jew in the public and the private. Sometimes, in those days, you're only able to be in the private. So that's why it says you should be God-fearing in the innermost recesses of the heart, which means in the private. Now, how do we really know if somebody's really God-fearing? And that's why this prayer continues even after the times. Now we could say the big Shema as well, but they kept this prayer still. And they kept the prayer that you should be privately a good Jew. What does that mean, privately? Now, the key, the trick of being a good person is not only being good in public, but even in private. Private is a much greater feat if you're able to be God-fearing in private. Most people, when they go in public, they conduct themselves like a mensch. They conduct themselves because people are watching. But when they're in private, they don't act like a mensch. They act like a chazer, or they act like a wilde chaya. Privately, they don't conduct themselves the right way. And this is what it says. Always be a man in the inner recesses. That means even when you're in the privacy of your home. You're like the Moranos. You're like a Jew that has to hide. You're alone. Even, Susan, thank you very much for the idea of being a privately a good person, to be anonymous. Yeah, should be private. That could be one explanation. But I'm going to tell you is that to be a good Jew, you need to be so even in total privacy. What does it mean total privacy? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to his students, La'olam, he told his students that your fear of heaven, La'olam tehei, yirat shamayim, kimora basar v'dam. That your fear of heaven should be like the fear of the blood and flesh and blood. You should fear God like you fear another human being. In other words, like this. When we're in public, then we're good people because people are watching us. Someone's watching you, so you have to act in a certain way. But when you're alone, how do you conduct yourself then? When you're in the privacy of your home, let's say, people don't see you. The community doesn't see you. How do you conduct yourself to your family? That's where we see who you really are. And even without the family, another even deeper level is, how do you conduct yourself when you're all alone? Nobody's watching you. You have the tax return, and you can make a little change on it, on your numbers, and save a little bit money, steal from the government privately, quietly, nobody knows, right? You're all alone on the internet. Nobody knows who you are. You could say certain things anonymously, right? Things which are very disturbing. Or you can go befriend certain people or go on certain sites. Nobody knows you. You're anonymous. This is what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to his students. He said, you should have your yirat shamayim, your fear of heaven should be kimora basar v'dam, like the fear of the flesh and blood. If you know that God is watching you wherever you are, then you conduct yourself in a different way. It's a famous story that's told in the Chafetz Chaim about a fellow that was traveling in a wagon, and the wagon driver was going past the farm. And the wagon driver was hungry. So what did he do? He told the fellow in the wagon, he says, you know what? He said, I want you to do me a favor. He says, tells the guy that he's taking on the wagon, the taxi driver, those days they drive the wagon, yeah? He tells the taxi driver, tells him, I'm very hungry. I want to go grab an apple from a tree. But I need you to do me a favor. If you see the owner of the farm is coming by while I go get that apple, shout to me and I'll run over back, and then we'll go run away so I won't get caught. From being a rider in a taxi, he became suddenly an accomplice to a crime. I mean, not a major crime, very small crime. Nobody's really watching. It's like, what's it taking an apple from the tree that doesn't belong to you? I mean, what's the difference, really, right? in our shul, we have an apple tree in front of the shul, right? And we don't use the apple tree much, but it comes before Rosh Hashanah. We take the kids out, and we have a trip to the apple farm. The apple farm is right by our shul in the front. We told the kids we're going to the farm. We take them to the apple farm in the front of the shul, and it saves us money from renting a bus to go to the farm. We have the apples right in front of the shul. And we go and we take the apples, we take it down for Rosh Hashanah. It's one of the big things in the preschool, you dip the apple in the honey for Rosh Hashanah. The kids are very excited about that trip. Sometimes we come there and we see there are no apples there. So wondering, where's the apples going? So we started looking a little bit carefully, and we see the people from the street. In fact, somebody would come with a ladder, and take all the apples from our property. And now we have, because after 10/7, we built a nice big fence over there, but there's still a section of the tree that hangs over. So there's still people coming and tell them, "What are you doing?" "Oh, it's a problem." I said, "What are you doing? It's not your tree." "Well, we thought it's for everyone. So it's for the kids." Anyway, so they go away and they come back again. They come at night because we have cameras. So people are busy stealing our apples. This is a major situation over here. But getting back to our story, I'll just give you an example of how people feel about apples. So this fellow was driving through the apple farm, and he tells the man, "You watch out. You stay in the wagon, and if the owner comes or somebody comes, you see someone, call me." So this fellow, he was a Jewish guy. He didn't know, but he was a little rabbi too. So the guy goes to get the apples, and as he goes about to pick the apple, he shouts out, "Someone's watching! Someone's watching!" So the fellow quickly, he drops everything and goes, and he runs back to the wagon. He hits the horses. He starts to run. "Someone's watching," he was screaming at him. Came in. He looks back. The guy afterwards, he sees, "What are you telling me, mister? There's nobody watching." He said, No, someone's watching." He said, "Who's watching? I see nobody watching." He said, "Hashem is watching. Hashem is there watching. God is watching." So he didn't understand that even though nobody's watching, no human being is watching, but Hashem watches when you steal. So this is what we say over here. You should be God-fearing in the secret. What does it mean, the secret? And the secret means when you're in your privacy, you think nobody's there. But you always have to be real. A real person. Yeah? A real person realizes that you have to be authentic. You have to be ethical. You have to be a good person even when nobody's watching, because Hashem is watching. You think you can get away with it, with your taxes or whatever it is, right? You think nobody's watching. I'm not worried about the CRA. I'm worried about the real accountant, the real creator of the heaven and earth is watching you. That's what we say. You should be God-fearing in the secret, in the privacy. Like I said, there are many people that they're very, very fine people. They come to the synagogue, they come to here, they come there, they come to the community center, and they're in the public forum, they're great. But they come home and they're ogres in their house. Ogres. Difficult, challenging people in the house. They're harsh parents, harsh spouses, but everybody speaks so nicely about them, right? Because they're good people in the public. Torah tells us, no, you need to be good in the private, because that's what it means to be real. And that's what he says over here. And you need to acknowledge the truth. Truth is a very interesting thing. It means not to be hypocritical. It means not to be one person in the public, one person in the private. You need to be the same person. Moed ala emes. You need to acknowledge the truth. The word emes is a very nice word. Truth. But in Hebrew, the word is emes. Emes. What is emes? That's the word for truth in Hebrew. If you give a look at the word, the etymological makeup of the word emet, you'll see something very interesting. The word emes is made up of 3 Hebrew letters. There's an aleph, there's a mem, and there's a taf. 3 letters, right? First letter is aleph, the middle letter of the word is mem, the last letter is taf. What do we know about the letter aleph? That's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. What do we know about the letter taf? It's the last letter of the alphabet. So it's like A to Z. So from A to Z, you need to be truthful. Aleph to taf. What's the letter mem? The letter mem reminds us of middle. It's the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet. You count the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, you'll find that the 2 middle letters is mem. The middle letter is mem. Actually, if you count all the long letters, the final letters, it's 27 letters. So if you go exactly 27 in the middle, you'll find there is the regular mem and the final mem. But mem is the middle letter. So the word emes means to be consistent, to be the same. Aleph at the beginning, at the A, Taf, which is the last letter, like the Z of the Hebrew alphabet, at the end, and Mem to be in the middle. So that's about a person that's honest, integral, Jewish in every aspect of their life. They're not hypocrites. They are consistently good and proper, and that's hard. It's hard. A lot of people like to let go. So this would say, Moed ala emes, you must agree to the truth. Agree to the truth. Be truthful to yourself. It's interesting he uses the word agree to the truth. So the Rabbi explains, what does it mean over here? Moed ala emes, to agree to the truth. So the truth, we say many times in America, they say, when you go up in the court, what do you say? I will say the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Right? The truth and nothing but the truth. Being truthful is a very, very hard quality. Most of us like to let go sometimes. So moed ala emes, you need to be moed on the truth. In the Torah, there's a concept of someone that's just truthful halfway. It speaks about, let's say, someone comes to ask someone else for a loan. They owe them $100, and they say, "Where's my $100?" So you have one person who says, "Oh, here's the $100. Yeah, I owe you $100. Here's the $100." You have another person who denies the whole thing. He says, "I don't owe you $100. What are you talking about? Never happened." That's called rejecting everything, right? And then you have a concept of moed b'miktzas. You have someone who says, "Oh, that I don't owe you $100. I paid you already $50. I owe you only $50. Right? I owe you only $50. I paid already the other $50. But now I owe you half." So what does the Torah say? The Torah says a person like that is suspect. The person who rejects the loan, you can't do anything because there's no paperwork. It's his word against the other person's word. So there's no proof for it. So he doesn't have to pay him. But if somebody says, "I already paid you $50, but I owe you $50. I only owe you $50," that person is suspect. Because a lot of times people don't want to be, don't want to say, don't want to be liars. So they agree to a little bit. They'll agree to a little bit. They'll say, I owe you only 50, right? Because they can't get themselves to lie. It's hard to lie completely, right? So they agree to a little bit. So the Torah says that a person like that is suspect. When they're agreeing to the loan, but they're saying, I only owe you half of it. So the Torah says that this kind of person is called a moide b'miktzas. He agrees to a little bit. He doesn't agree to the whole truth, right? A little bit of the truth he agrees to, because he has a guilty conscience, right? And he's just trying to get out of the other $50 if he can. Get a deal, right? Get a little. So Torah says that person needs to go to the Beth Din and swear on a Torah that they don't owe the other $50, right? That they only owe $50. That's called a moide b'miktzas. Why? Because the feeling is that if we'll have to go and make a swearing on a Torah, person won't be able to lie, and they'll admit to the truth. Or it could be that it is the truth, so that's fine. But they're suspect when you agree to a little bit. And that, the Rebbe says, this whole concept of agreeing to a little bit is, most of us, to some degree, we want to do a little bit good, but not everything good. We try, we're good sometimes in public, but not good in private. Everybody's got that. So we have that moide b'miktzas syndrome, that where God says, you're supposed to do this. You say, okay, I'll do a little bit. Yeah. You got to go to shul. I'll go once in a while. You got to keep shop. I'll keep a little bit of shop. I'll keep a little bit. Moide b'miktzas. So we say, that person needs to we need to work on that person. You need to be real. Real means if you believe in something and that's right, do it the whole way. Don't do half jobs. Don't just be religious in public, show off, right? Private too. And the person that's private, we tell them do a little bit in public too. So moida ala emes, what he says over here, that you need to acknowledge the truth. That means the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And you need to realize that God is both in the public domain and in the private domain. And a person shouldn't say, well, I can get away with it in the privates, I won't be. Now, this is what Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai told his students. He says, listen, my dear students, he says, I want you to be real people and to fear God like you fear flesh and blood, like you fear a human being, like as if God is watching you, he's standing over you. And I think that is a great help for people. We're always busy making moral decisions on different things in life. And we always have to think to ourselves, how would God look at that? How does God look at it? If we have to tell it to God, how would God respond to it? That is the meaning over here is the one line over here, a man should be forever God-fearing in the innermost recesses of the heart, acknowledge the truth, and speak the truth in his heart. So you need to be truthful, not only in the public, but also in the private. Not only the private, but also in the public. We need to be real people who have the ability to realize and recognize that always there's someone watching us. There's someone watching us. And through that, we will merit definitely the coming of Mashiach Tzidkeinu, may it be made Amen. Any questions, my friends? Anyone have some questions?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That somebody would change figures on a tax form. Do something like that.
No one in our company.
Good.
No one in our company. Yeah. Anyone else? Question?
Shabbat shalom to everyone.
Yeah, just one more question. We got from Susan a question. Susan, go ahead.
It's not so much a question as a comment, because I also think for people who are visibly Jewish, it's really important to keep that consistency, because it also reflects on the community. I know personally a friend of mine who is very visibly Orthodox, no, not in Canada, and I'm not mentioning any names, but her husband, who was visibly Orthodox, ended up having an affair and having a baby with a non-Jewish woman.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well,
I-
what goes on in private, lots of times people fall into different things. But one of the greatest ways of deterring that is what we always remember: Hashem is watching.
that's kind of why I was rounding out, like, really, we have to be consistent, I don't know, because
Yeah. Sometimes the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is very strong, and sometimes we have what's known as like a temporary insanity. Sometimes people make serious mistakes.
right.
But even for those people, even if someone is drunk and they're God forbid behind the driver's wheel, right? When something happens, you sober up very quickly. When you have the fear of what could happen, you realize I'm in the driver's seat and I better give someone else to drive, right? Because when you realize how dangerous you are and how Hashem is watching you, then you sober up quickly. You sober up quickly. Great fear sobers up people. So the same thing is with infatuation or with these other things. Same thing as well. Even though there's a famous story in the Gemara that someone was having an affair, and they were a religious person. They were wearing the tzitzit, and while they were on the act, the string of the tzitzit smacked them in their face, and they woke up and they said, "What am I doing? What am I crazy?" And they ran out. The tzitzis reminded them, and they ran out. So when you're constantly aware of God, it's helpful. It's helpful to make sure that we don't go in the wrong direction, even when we are in the most private situations, that we don't compromise it. No, anyways, a good Shabbos to everybody, and nice having everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbos, thank you.
Thank you.
Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, thank you.
Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Thank you very much. See you 4:40.
4:40.
10:05.
That's
Thank you.
when the mincha tonight.